Businessman humiliates pregnant wife at party. 25 years later, meets son at airport and discovers he's the new owner of his companies. The grand ballroom of the luxurious Manhattan hotel was resplendent with shimmering chandeliers and elegantly dressed guests, all gathered to celebrate the success of Nathaniel Wexler, one of New York's most prominent businessmen. The air was thick with anticipation as Nathaniel, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo, stood behind the podium, beaming with pride. His wife, Celeste, pregnant and glowing, sat at the front table, her eyes sparkling with admiration. She had spent weeks helping him prepare for this night, ensuring that every detail was perfect. As Nathaniel began his speech, a hush fell over the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, his voice booming with confidence, "thank you for being here tonight to celebrate my achievements." He paused, scanning the audience with a self-satisfied grin, before continuing, "I owe much of my success to my wonderful wife, Celeste." The crowd erupted in applause, and Celeste beamed, grateful for the acknowledgement. But as Nathaniel spoke, his tone began to shift, and his gaze fell sharply on Celeste. "However, I must admit it hasn't been easy," he continued, his smile fading. "You see, Celeste has always struggled with her insecurities. I remember when she thought it would be a good idea to redecorate our home." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the ballroom. "Let's just say we had to hire a professional to fix it. But that's all right, dear?" The laughter that erupted from the crowd was stifled by the shock that rippled through the room. Celeste's smile faltered, her heart sinking as she felt the weight of humiliation wash over her. The joy that had filled her just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a burning sense of betrayal. She glanced around, seeking the eyes of supportive friends, but found only disbelief and discomfort. "I mean, it's not easy being married to someone as successful as I am," Nathaniel continued, oblivious to the growing tension. "Sometimes I wonder if she even realizes how hard I work to provide for us. Wouldn't you agree, folks?" He gestured to the guests, inviting their laughter, but many simply shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Celeste's cheeks flushed crimson as she fought back tears, each word from Nathaniel cutting deeper than the last. She had spent years supporting him, sacrificing her own dreams to build a life together, only to be reduced to a punchline in his grand speech. The camaraderie they once shared felt like a distant memory, and in that moment she felt utterly alone. "Celeste, my love," Nathaniel said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I truly appreciate all the times you've tried to help me with my business. Just remember, sweetie, not everyone can be a Wexler." He winked at the audience, and they erupted into laughter again, leaving Celeste reeling. The applause faded into a heavy silence, and Nathaniel, satisfied with the reaction, turned to another topic. But Celeste could no longer bear to listen. With a shaky breath, she excused herself from the table, her chair scraping against the polished floor, drawing the attention of several guests. She walked briskly toward the exit, her heart racing as she fought against the tears welling in her eyes. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, a surge of emotions overwhelmed her. The humiliation, the betrayal, the anger, it all mixed into a potent cocktail of despair. She had thought this night would be a celebration, a moment of pride, but instead, it had turned into a nightmare. Nathaniel's voice echoed in her mind, taunting her with memories of their early days when they were partners in every sense. She recalled the dreams they had shared, the laughter that once filled their home, and the love that had brought them together. How had it come to this? How had he become a man who would publicly ridicule his wife, the mother of his child? Back inside, the party continued without her. Nathaniel, meanwhile, was blissfully unaware of the storm he had unleashed. He reveled in the attention, basking in the adoration of his peers, raising his glass for a toast, while Celeste stood alone outside, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Where's Celeste?" one of the guests asked, noticing her absence. Nathaniel shrugged, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Probably needed some air." "She'll be fine," he replied, a charming smile plastered on his face. As the night wore on, Nathaniel continued to entertain his guests, sharing stories of his business ventures and successes. But a small part of him felt an inexplicable void, a nagging feeling that he had crossed a line that night. Yet, he quickly pushed that thought aside, choosing instead to focus on the accolades being showered upon him. Outside, Celeste leaned against the cold stone wall, staring up at the stars that twinkled above. She felt a mix of sadness and anger, and the weight of her pregnancy felt heavier than ever. What kind of life was she bringing their child into? Would she be able to nurture and support their baby, while feeling so small and insignificant beside Nathaniel's towering ego. As the party continued, she took a deep breath, steeling herself against the onslaught of emotions. This was not the end. She would not allow Nathaniel's cruelty to define her or their future child. If anything, this moment of humiliation would be the catalyst for change. She would find a way to reclaim her voice, to ensure that their child would grow up knowing the value of respect and love. With a determined heart, Celeste wiped away her tears and straightened her posture. She would not let Nathaniel's words defeat her. As she made her way back inside, she resolved to confront him, to demand the respect she deserved, not just as his wife, but as the mother of their child. She would no longer be the punchline in his story. Inside the ballroom, the celebration continued, but it felt like a different world. As she approached the entrance, she caught Nathaniel's eye, and for a brief moment, their gazes locked. There was a flicker of confusion in his expression, perhaps a hint of realization that something was amiss. But before he could process it, she was upon him, her heart racing, ready to confront the man she had once loved so fiercely. "Nathaniel," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. "We need to talk." The laughter around them faded into a distant hum as the reality of the moment settled in. Nathaniel's smile faltered as he took in the gravity of her tone. The celebration around them seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the two of them standing at the precipice of a confrontation that had been long overdue. Nathaniel Wexler stood alone in the vast expanse of his luxurious mansion, surrounded by the glint of trophies and accolades that adorned the walls like a gilded prison. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that danced across the polished marble floors, highlighting the emptiness that echoed throughout the halls. The once vibrant laughter of celebrations lingered in the air, now replaced by a haunting silence that gnawed at him. It had been 25 years since that fateful night at the gala, yet the sting of his actions still lingered like an unwelcome guest. His gaze drifted to a particularly ostentatious trophy, a testament to his business acumen, a symbol of his relentless drive. He picked it up, the weight of it heavy in his hands, as if it were a burden rather than an achievement. "What good is this?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. "All the success, and yet I stand here alone." The trophy felt cold and uninviting against his skin, much like the solitude that had become his constant companion. As he returned the trophy to its place on the shelf, his mind drifted back to Celeste. He remembered the warmth of her smile, the way her laughter used to fill the room with light. But those memories were tainted by the scarring events that had unfolded at the gala. He had had every intention of praising her, of celebrating the woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. Instead, he had chosen to humiliate her, revealing her insecurities in front of a crowd that had once adored him. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, and he fought the urge to bury it under layers of pride and arrogance. With a heavy heart, Nathaniel sank into the plush leather chair in his study, the dim light casting shadows over his weary face. He reached for a glass of scotch, the amber liquid swirling inside the crystal tumbler, mirroring the turmoil within him. As he took a sip, the warmth spread through his chest, momentarily dulling the ache of regret. But it was fleeting. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like a vice, and no amount of alcohol could ease the burden of his past. In stark contrast to Nathaniel's life of excess, Celeste had dedicated herself to their son, Lucas, nurturing him with an abundance of love and care. As the years rolled on, she transformed the pain of her husband's absence into lessons of strength and independence for Lucas. In a modest apartment filled with the vibrant colors of childhood, she created a sanctuary where Lucas could flourish away from the shadows of Nathaniel's legacy. Celeste was a force of nature, her spirit unbroken by the humiliation she had suffered. She taught Lucas to be resilient, often reflecting on the strength she found in herself after that fateful night. "You have to be strong, my love," she would tell him, her voice soft yet firm. "Life will test you, but never let anyone make you feel less than you are." Lucas listened intently, absorbing her words like a sponge, his young mind processing the complexities of their situation. On one particular afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the small living room, Celeste sat cross-legged on the floor with Lucas, who was now a teenager, sketching in his notebook. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. Lucas looked up, revealing a rough sketch of a skyscraper, its lines bold and ambitious. "I want to build something one day, something that makes people feel alive, just like you always do, Mom." His eyes sparkled with determination, a reflection of her unwavering support. Celeste's heart swelled with pride. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Lucas. Just remember to stay true to yourself, no matter what." She reached out, ruffling his hair affectionately. "And if you ever feel lost, just look inside. Your heart knows the way." As the years passed, Lucas grew into a confident young man, embodying the values his mother instilled in him. He thrived in school, impressing teachers and peers alike with his innovative ideas and natural charisma. He was a leader, not just by title, but by the way he inspired those around him. In the boardroom of his school's business club, he captivated his fellow students with his vision of a sustainable future, his voice filled with passion. Imagine a world where businesses not only thrive, but also give back to the community, Lucas proposed during a meeting, his blue eyes shining with excitement. We can create products that are environmentally friendly and make a difference. It's not just about profit, it's about purpose. His friends erupted into applause, their enthusiasm infectious. "You're right, Lucas. We need to change the way we think about success," one of them exclaimed. As the applause died down, Lucas felt a familiar pang of longing. He often thought about his father, the man who had chosen ambition over family, and he wondered what life would have been like had things been different. He had only a handful of vague memories of Nathaniel, mostly filtered through Celeste's stories, which oscillated between admiration and betrayal. "Do you ever think about reaching out to him?" Mia, his closest friend, asked one day as they walked through the park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Just to see what he's like now?" Lucas sighed, contemplating her words. "I do sometimes. But what if he's still the same man? What if he hasn't changed at all?" He kicked a pebble, frustration etched on his face. "I don't want to set myself up for disappointment." Mia nodded, understanding his hesitation. "But what if he's different? People can change, Maybe he's been thinking about you too." Her voice was gentle, a reminder that hope could exist even in the darkest of situations. "Maybe," Lucas conceded, a flicker of curiosity igniting within him. "But I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of confrontation. Not yet." Back in the mansion, Nathaniel stared at the wall of trophies once more, the shiny surfaces reflecting the light in a way that seemed almost mocking. Each award, each recognition, was a testament to his success. But they were also reminders of the family he had lost in pursuit of them. The emptiness of his life weighed heavily on him, and he found himself yearning for the warmth of a family he had taken for granted. "Is this all there is?" he asked aloud, the question echoing in the hollow space. Success without love? He clenched his jaw, frustration boiling within him. The memories of Celeste raising Lucas alone, the sacrifices she made, haunted him. She had given everything to their son while he chased after accolades that meant nothing without the people he loved. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue across the room, Nathaniel picked up his phone and scrolled through old photos. He paused at a picture of Celeste cradling a newborn Lucas in her arms, her face radiant with joy. The image tugged at his heartstrings, stirring feelings he had buried deep within. "What have I done?" he whispered, the weight of his regret settling heavily on his shoulders. In that moment, he realized he had to confront his past. He had to find a way back to the family he had forsaken, to the son he had never truly known. But the question loomed large. Would Lucas be willing to accept a father who had failed him so profoundly? Would he even want to meet the man who had chosen ambition over family? As night fell, Nathaniel sat in silence, pondering his next move. The journey to redemption would not be easy, but perhaps it was time to finally take the first step. The shadows of his past loomed large, but the possibility of rebuilding a connection with his son flickered in the distance, a beacon of hope that he was desperate to reach. Nathaniel was on the verge of boarding his flight to Chicago, a trip that was meant to solidify his empire's influence over the tech industry. The airport buzzed with travelers rushing to their destinations, oblivious to the storm of emotions brewing beneath Nathaniel's calm facade. He walked through the terminal, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the chaos around him. He glanced at the departures board, mentally ticking off the agenda for his meeting. His mind was preoccupied with numbers, projections, and the next big deal. But a nagging sense of unease lingered at the back of his mind. As he approached the security line, Nathaniel spotted a young man standing off to the side, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone. The young man had tousled hair and a confident posture, his tailored blazer hinting at a sense of style and purpose that reminded Nathaniel of himself at that age. There was something familiar about him, but Nathaniel shrugged it off, attributing it to the countless faces he encountered in his line of work. "Why does it feel like I've seen him before?" Nathaniel muttered under his breath, shaking his head as he stepped forward in the queue. He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the upcoming meeting that could solidify his legacy. The airport was chaotic, and his mind was a whirlwind of plans. But that young man's presence nagged at him. Meanwhile, Lucas adjusted his bag on his shoulder and turned his attention back to his phone. He was on his way to an important meeting with potential investors, a chance to showcase his innovative ideas that he had worked tirelessly on for years. Why did he feel so anxious? He had prepared for this moment, but a part of him still longed to know more about the father he had never met. His mother had shared stories of Nathaniel, always with a mixture of love and bitterness. Lucas had grown up with a deep-seated desire to understand the man who had chosen ambition over family. As he walked toward his gate, Lucas noticed Nathaniel again, standing just a few feet away. Is that him? He wondered. The man looked imposing, exuding an air of authority that was hard to ignore. But it wasn't just his demeanor. It was the way he carried himself, the subtle confidence in his stride. Lucas felt a connection he couldn't quite place. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of his purpose today. He was here to prove himself, to show the world that he could stand on his own 2 feet, regardless of the shadows of his father's legacy. Just then, Nathaniel caught Lucas's eye. There was something about the young man that made him pause. He felt an inexplicable tug at his heart, a sense of recognition that he couldn't quite articulate. As their gazes held for a brief moment, Nathaniel felt a spark of curiosity. What's your story, young man? He thought, although he didn't know why he felt that way. Perhaps it was the intensity in Lucas's eyes, or the determination that radiated from him. Excuse me, sir, Lucas said, taking a step closer to Nathaniel. Do you mind if I ask you something? Sure, Nathaniel replied, surprised at the sudden boldness of the young man. What's on your mind? I couldn't help but notice you look. Well, important, Lucas said, trying to gauge the man's reaction. Are you heading to a meeting? Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the young man's straightforwardness. Something like that. Just business, you know? Business can be cutthroat, Lucas observed, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. But it can also be an opportunity to change things for the better. Nathaniel found himself drawn into the conversation. You sound like you know a thing or two about it. What do you do? I'm working on a startup, Lucas replied, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. We're developing a new technology that could revolutionize the industry. It's all about finding innovative solutions to old problems. Impressive, Nathaniel said, genuinely interested. What's your angle? Lucas hesitated for just a moment, unsure of how much to share with a stranger who seemed to embody the very world he wished to conquer. We're focusing on sustainability and efficiency. I believe that businesses can thrive while also being responsible to the environment. It's a tough sell, but I think it's worth it. Nathaniel nodded, impressed by the young man's passion. That's a noble goal. I suppose someone has to take the lead on that front. Yes, exactly, Lucas replied, his confidence building. I want to make a difference, not just in my life, but in the lives of others. I want to prove that success doesn't have to come at a cost to our planet. Nathaniel felt a pang of nostalgia, a sense of something he had lost along the way. He had once held similar ideals, but somewhere in the pursuit of wealth and success, those values had been overshadowed. You're a rare breed in this business, he said, his voice softer than before. Most people are only looking out for themselves. Maybe that's why I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate this world, Lucas admitted, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his tone. I've heard stories about the cutthroat nature of corporate life, and it scares me. Nathaniel's heart ached at Lucas's words. He remembered the ambition that had driven him, the ruthless decisions he had made that had cost him dearly. You'll find your way, Nathaniel assured him. Just stay true to your values. It will set you apart. As they spoke, Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this young man, something that tugged at his heartstrings. He felt a connection that was both profound and unsettling, as if he were looking into a mirror reflecting a version of himself that he had long since buried. Suddenly, the overhead announcement broke through their conversation, calling for passengers boarding the flight to Chicago. Nathaniel glanced at the departure board and realized his time was running short. That looks like that's my flight, he said reluctantly, glancing back at Lucas. It was nice talking to you. Likewise, Lucas replied, a hint of disappointment lacing his voice. Good luck in your meeting. Thanks, Nathaniel said, feeling a strange sense of regret at leaving this conversation behind. And good luck with your startup. I hope you make the impact you're aiming for. As Nathaniel turned to walk away, he felt an inexplicable urge to say more, to dig deeper into the connection that had sparked between them. But he brushed it off, telling himself that he had important matters to attend to. The young man was just another face in a sea of many, or so he tried to convince himself. Lucas watched Nathaniel walk away, a mix of admiration and confusion swirling in his chest. There was something about the man that felt significant, and the conversation had sparked a flicker of hope within him. But as he turned to head toward his own gate, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were intertwined in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Just then, a group of business people rushed past him, their conversations a blur of jargon and ambition. Lucas took a deep breath, steeling himself for the upcoming meeting. He couldn't help but replay his interaction with Nathaniel in his mind. Who was that man, he thought, the question echoing in his mind? And why did I feel such a strange connection to him? As he walked toward the gate, he glanced back one last time, catching a glimpse of Nathaniel disappearing into the crowd. Unbeknownst to both of them, their lives were about to converge in ways that neither could foresee, and the weight of their shared history would soon come crashing down on them. Lucas was pacing through the bustling airport, a blend of excitement and nervous energy swirling within him. The tall ceilings echoed with the sounds of announcements and the chatter of travelers, a symphony of modern life. He adjusted his navy blazer, glancing at his watch as he prepared for a crucial business meeting that could define the trajectory of his career. But amidst the chaos, he couldn't shake the feeling of something significant hanging in the air, an inexplicable weight that made him pause. As he stepped into a small cafe to grab a quick coffee, he spotted Mia, his longtime friend and confidant, waving at him from a corner table. She had a bright smile, her usual buoyant self, but there was something in Lucas's demeanor that caught her attention immediately. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost," Mia teased lightly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Are you ready for this meeting?" Lucas chuckled nervously, sliding into the chair opposite her. "Yeah, I will be, I don't know. Something feels off today." Mia leaned in, her expression shifting to one of concern. "Nah, what do you mean? You've been prepping for this pitch for weeks. You're going to nail it." He sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. "It's just my mom mentioned something about my dad again last night. I can't shake the thought of wanting to know more about him, and it's messing with my focus." Mia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Your dad, the one who left?" Lucas nodded slowly. "Yeah, the one who's basically a stranger. I've always had this curiosity, but it feels more intense now. Like I'm supposed to find him or something. Have you thought about reaching out?" she asked, her voice softening. "I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Rejection? Anger? I don't know. Lucas hesitated, his gaze drifting around the cafe. "I want to know who he is, but what if he doesn't want to know me?" Mia took a sip of her coffee, considering his words. "You'll never know unless you try. Besides, you're not the same kid who was abandoned. You're a successful businessman now. You have something to offer even if he doesn't see it." Lucas nodded, her words echoing in his mind. Just then, the sound of a commotion caught his attention. He glanced up to see a group of people rushing towards the exit, faces twisted in fear. The air suddenly felt tense. "What's going on?" Lucas asked, standing up to get a better view. "I don't know," Mia replied, her voice rising in concern. Panic surged through the crowd as the alarm bells blared, a sharp contrast to the casual chatter just moments ago. They could hear muffled shouts, and the smell of smoke began to waft through the air, causing a collective gasp from those nearby. "Lucas, we should get out of here," Mia urged, grabbing his arm. "No, wait," he said, his instincts kicking in. "There might be people who need help." Before she could protest, Lucas dashed towards the source of the commotion, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He could hear the chaos around him. People yelling, children crying, the sound of footsteps rushing towards the exits. As he approached the crowd, he spotted a woman trapped against a wall, her eyes wide with fear. "Help! Someone, please!" she cried, her voice trembling. Lucas's heart raced as he surged forward, instinctively moving towards her. "Hang on, I'm coming!" he shouted, trying to keep his voice steady despite the rising chaos. He could feel the heat of the flames licking at the air, a reminder of the urgency of the situation. Meanwhile, Nathaniel Wexler was at the same airport, his mind elsewhere as he prepared for another business trip. He had spent years building his empire. But in that moment, he felt an emptiness gnawing at him. He walked through the terminal, his eyes scanning the crowd, but not really seeing anyone. The noise around him faded into the background as he contemplated the choices he had made over the years. Suddenly, an ear-piercing alarm jolted him from his thoughts. He turned just in time to see the panic spreading among the travelers. "What the hell is happening?" he muttered under his breath, instinctively moving toward the source of the noise. As Nathaniel approached the chaos, he saw people running, some directing others to safety. A wave of urgency washed over him. He had spent too many years focused on his achievements, neglecting the human side of his life. Now, seeing the terror in the eyes of those around him, he felt a flicker of something he had long buried responsibility. Just then, he noticed a young man, his back to Nathaniel, who was attempting to help a woman trapped in a corner. The man's determination struck Nathaniel, and he felt an odd sense of connection, as if he had seen that resolve before. "Get back!" Nathaniel shouted to the crowd, motioning for them to clear the area as he rushed forward. The flames were spreading quickly, licking at the walls, and he could feel the heat intensifying. Without thinking, he pushed past the throng and reached the young man. "Let me help," Nathaniel said, moving closer to the woman. "On 3, we need to pull her away from the wall." Lucas turned, surprised by the authority in the stranger's voice. Who are you? Doesn't matter now, just trust me, Nathaniel replied, adrenaline coursing through him. 1, 2, 3. Together they pulled the woman away from the flames, her relief palpable as they dragged her to safety. As they reached a safe distance, Nathaniel glanced back at the inferno, the fire growing more intense, threatening to consume everything in its path. Thank you, the woman gasped, still trembling. I thought I was going to die. Lucas turned to Nathaniel, his heart racing. You were amazing back there. I didn't think we could get her out. Nathaniel, still catching his breath, felt a strange sense of pride swell within him. You did just as much. You were brave. In that moment, as they both stood catching their breath, their eyes locked. There was something familiar about the young man, something that stirred deep within Nathaniel, but he couldn't quite place it. Are you okay? Lucas asked, concern etched on his face. Nathaniel nodded, but internally, he was grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. He felt the weight of the past pressing down on him, the mistakes he had made, the relationships he had neglected. He was struck by the notion that perhaps he had been given a chance to connect, to change. I need to get out of here, Lucas said, glancing around nervously. No, I have a meeting, but I don't know if I can go back to business after all this. Nathaniel hesitated, grappling with the urge to say something profound, something that could bridge the gap between them. Sometimes you have to face the chaos to find clarity, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. And what's more important, the meeting or the people you're with? Lucas stared at him, his brow furrowing in thought. You're right. Maybe I need to reevaluate what success really means. Nathaniel felt a pang in his chest, an echo of regret mixed with hope. Maybe this was the moment he had been waiting for, an opportunity to reflect on his life, to confront his past. As the alarms continued to blare and the fire crews rushed in, the two men stood for a moment in the midst of the chaos, each feeling an unspoken bond forming between them. It was a fleeting connection, yet it sparked something. Deep within Nathaniel, a desire to understand, to reconnect with the world he had distanced himself from. Let's get out of here, Lucas finally said, breaking the moment. I don't want to be in this chaos any longer. Yeah, let's go, Nathaniel replied, his mind racing. As they moved to exit the terminal together, Nathaniel felt the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressing down on him. But for the first time in years, he also felt a glimmer of hope. As flames erupted in a nearby terminal at JFK Airport, crackling like a furious beast awakened from slumber. The air thickened with smoke, swirling and choking the life out of the bustling scene. People screamed, their panic echoing through the high ceilings and polished floors. Nathaniel Wexler, caught in the chaos as he prepared for his business flight, felt the world around him shift into a surreal blur. Instinct kicked in, overriding the years of self-centeredness that had defined his life. He pushed through the throng of panicked travelers, his heart pounding in his chest. In a moment that felt both foreign and familiar, he felt a rush of adrenaline, a spark of purpose igniting deep within him. Get back! Get back! Nathaniel shouted, his voice cutting through the hysteria. He spotted a young employee, barely out of her teens, frozen in fear as flames licked the walls behind her. Without thinking, Nathaniel lunged forward, grabbing her by the arm. This way, we need to move! He yanked her away from the advancing fire, pulling her to safety, just as a burning piece of ceiling fell where she had stood moments before. Thank you! Thank you! She gasped, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. Nathaniel nodded curtly, his mind racing. He couldn't dwell on what he had just done. There were still people in danger. Meanwhile, Lucas, standing a few yards away, watched the scene unfold with a mix of fear and admiration. The chaos around him blurred as he focused on the man who had just saved, the young employee. There was something about him, a certain aura, a confidence that drew Lucas in. He felt a strange connection, but he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Come on, we have to help others, Lucas shouted to his friend Mia, who was frozen in shock. He grabbed her hand and started moving toward the source of the smoke, instinctively drawn to the chaos. Are you crazy? Mia yelled, pulling back. We should get out of here. No, people are trapped. We can't just leave them, Lucas insisted, his voice firm. He pushed through the crowd, searching for anyone who might need assistance. Just then, his eyes landed on Nathaniel again. The man was now helping another passenger, a woman who had fallen to the ground, panic-stricken. Lucas felt a surge of admiration for this stranger, who was risking everything to help. He darted toward them, instinctively joining the effort. Let's get her up, Lucas said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He and Nathaniel reached for the woman simultaneously, their hands gripping her under the arms. On three, Nathaniel barked, his voice commanding. 1, 2, 3. They heaved her upward, adrenaline surging through their veins. Together, they pulled her to safety, just as another piece of the ceiling collapsed behind them, sending debris crashing to the floor. Thank you both, the woman cried, tears streaming down her cheeks as she stumbled away from the danger. Lucas and Nathaniel exchanged a brief glance, an unspoken bond forming in the midst of chaos. As the smoke continued to thicken and the sound of sirens filled the air, Nathaniel turned to Lucas, who was breathing heavily, his shirt damp with sweat. Nathaniel's chest tightened as he took in the younger man's determined expression. There was something undeniably familiar about him, a spark of recognition that danced at the edge of his consciousness. "Are you all right?" Nathaniel asked, concern breaking through the layers of his typically guarded demeanor. "Yeah, I'm fine, just a little shaken," Lucas replied, running a hand through his hair, trying to shake off the remnants of fear. "But we need to help more people." Before Nathaniel could respond, a loud explosion reverberated through the terminal, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Panic erupted again as people screamed and scrambled for safety. Nathaniel instinctively grabbed Lucas's arm, pulling him closer. "Stay close, we can't get separated." Lucas nodded, his heart racing. "I don't know what's happening, but we have to get everyone out." They moved together, clearing a path through the chaos. Nathaniel's mind raced back to the last time he had felt this alive. This involved in something greater than himself. It had been years, decades, really. He had buried himself in business, wealth, and status, forgetting the simple act of caring for others. As they continued to help others escape the inferno, Nathaniel found himself drawn to Lucas's unwavering courage. Each time they rescued someone, he felt a pang of pride, a longing for connection that had been absent from his life for so long. "Your instincts are incredible," Nathaniel said to Lucas, as they paused for a moment, catching their breath. "You're a natural leader." "Thanks," Lucas replied, his eyes shining with determination. "I just want to make a difference. My mom always said that helping others is the most important thing." "Your mom sounds wise," Nathaniel said, an involuntary smile creeping onto his face. The moment felt surreal, standing there in the midst of chaos, yet feeling a strange sense of calm. Lucas looked at him, his gaze intense. "What about you? What drives you?" Nathaniel hesitated, the weight of his past pressing down on him. I've spent too much time chasing success, forgetting what really matters," he admitted, his voice low, "and I've neglected the people I should have cared for." Before Lucas could respond, another scream pierced the air. They both turned and saw an elderly woman trapped behind a pile of luggage, her frail body trembling in fear. Without a moment's hesitation, both Nathaniel and Lucas rushed toward her. "Stay calm, ma'am. We're here to help," Lucas called out, kneeling beside her. "Please, I can't move," she cried, her voice quaking. "All right, we're going to get you out of here," Nathaniel said, crouching down beside Lucas. "On the count of 3, we'll lift this luggage, okay?" "Okay," Lucas said, his eyes locked on Nathaniel. 1, 2, 3. Together, they heaved the luggage to the side, clearing a path for the woman. Thank you! The woman gasped as they helped her to her feet. "Go, get to safety," Nathaniel urged, watching as she stumbled away, grateful and terrified. As the smoke continued to billow, they both turned back to each other, adrenaline coursing through their veins. In that moment, amidst the chaos, Nathaniel felt a deep connection to Lucas that he couldn't ignore. "Who are you?" Nathaniel asked, his voice barely breaking through the noise. "Why do I feel like I know you?" Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, another wave of smoke rolled past them, forcing them to cover their mouths. They stumbled back, reorienting themselves in the thickening haze. "Let's find a way out," Lucas shouted, his voice strained. They moved again, navigating through the chaos, pushing past frightened travelers and debris. As they worked together, Nathaniel felt something shift within him, a realization dawning that he hadn't expected. He was not just saving strangers, he was confronting his own demons. Each life they saved was a step toward redemption for him, a chance to reconnect with the humanity he had long ignored. Despite the chaos, Nathaniel found himself hopeful. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a sense that perhaps it wasn't too late for him. As they approached the exit, they paused, panting, smoke swirling around them like a ghost. In that moment, Nathaniel looked deeply into Lucas's eyes and something clicked. "Lucas, what's your last name?" Nathaniel asked, his heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. Before Lucas could answer, a sudden roar of the fire surged behind them, snapping Nathaniel back to the present. They both turned, realizing they could no longer delay. They had to escape. "Let's go!" Lucas shouted, grabbing Nathaniel's arm, and together they dashed through the smoke, the weight of their unspoken truths hanging between them like a fragile thread. As they burst into the open air, the sounds of sirens and chaos faded behind them, but the weight of their encounter lingered. Nathaniel knew that whatever awaited them outside would change the course of their lives forever. As flames licked the edges of the airport terminal, smoke billowing in chaotic swirls, Nathaniel Wexler stumbled through the haze, his heart racing. The acrid scent of burning materials clawed at his throat, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins drowned out the panic. He'd always prided himself on his ability to stay calm in a crisis, but today felt different. Today, there was a strange urgency to his movements, a need to act beyond himself. In the midst of the chaos, he caught sight of a young man, moving with purpose through the crowd. Nathaniel squinted through the smoke, feeling an unfamiliar tug at his chest as he watched the young man help a group of frightened travelers who had fallen to the ground. There was something about the way he carried himself, a confidence mixed with empathy that struck a chord deep within Nathaniel. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow connected to this young man. "Hey, you!" Nathaniel shouted over the din, desperately trying to get the young man's attention. The boy turned, his eyes wide with determination, and for a moment, time stood still. Nathaniel felt a jolt of recognition, an inexplicable connection that he couldn't quite articulate. "Move that way! We need to clear a path!" Nathaniel shouted again, his voice cutting through the chaos. The young man nodded, a look of understanding flashing across his face, before he darted away to help others. As Nathaniel continued to navigate the chaos, pushing people to safety and trying to help where he could, he caught glimpses of the young man. His movements were fluid, purposeful, and instinctual. Each time their eyes met, Nathaniel felt that inexplicable bond grow stronger. Was it possible that he recognized something in this stranger? Or was it merely the adrenaline and confusion playing tricks on him? Just then, amid the smoke and confusion, Nathaniel watched as the young man rushed to help an elderly woman trapped under a fallen piece of debris. His heart raced as he saw the young man lift the heavy object with apparent ease, determination etched across his features. Nathaniel felt an overwhelming sense of admiration and something else, something deeper. Suddenly, the air filled with the shrill sound of sirens, and the chaos began to ebb as emergency personnel rushed in. Firefighters moved with precision, extinguishing the flames and assessing the injured. Nathaniel and the young man found themselves side by side, both panting heavily from their efforts. "Are you okay?" Nathaniel asked, his voice strained but laced with concern. The young man nodded, brushing soot from his brow. "I'm fine, just trying to help." His voice was calm, almost soothing, even amidst the chaos surrounding them. There was a depth in his eyes that Nathaniel couldn't quite place, but it held a certain intensity that made Nathaniel's heart race. Good. We need more people like you around here," Nathaniel replied, studying the young man's face. "What's your name?" "Lucas," he said, extending his hand. Nathaniel hesitated for a moment before shaking it, feeling a warmth radiate from the young man. "Nathaniel," he introduced himself, feeling an odd sense of pride in sharing his name. "You were incredible back there." "Just doing what anyone would do," Lucas replied, a modest smile gracing his lips. "I couldn't just stand by and watch." There was something about Lucas's humility that struck Nathaniel. He was reminded of the very qualities he had failed to nurture in himself over the years: compassion, selflessness, and a genuine desire to help others. The realization gnawed at him, creating a deep sense of discomfort. "Do you work around here?" Nathaniel asked, trying to keep the conversation going, to learn more about this young man who had captivated him so profoundly. "I'm actually in business," Lucas answered, glancing around as if gauging the damage. "I'm heading to a meeting right now, but, well, I guess that's not happening anymore." "Business?" Nathaniel repeated, intrigued. "What kind of business?" "Startups, mostly," Lucas said, enthusiasm creeping into his voice. "I'm working on a project that I believe could really change things for a lot of people." Nathaniel felt a swell of pride at Lucas's ambition, his mind racing with thoughts of how different this young man was from himself at that age. "That's impressive. You seem like you know what you're doing." "Thanks," Lucas replied. But there was a hint of vulnerability in his tone. I really want to make a difference, you know?" Nathaniel nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of his own past decisions pressing down on him. He had spent a lifetime building an empire, but at what cost? As he looked into Lucas's earnest eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that this young man was everything he had lost, a connection to hope, to a future that was bright and unblemished by the shadows of regret. "Do you have family?" Nathaniel asked, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. "Not much," Lucas replied, the light in his eyes dimming slightly. "My mom raised me by herself. She always talked about my dad, but I never really knew him. She said he was a successful businessman who, well, wasn't around much." The words struck Nathaniel like a physical blow. He felt the blood drain from his face as the implications of Lucas's statement hung in the air between them. This young man, with his fierce determination and unyielding spirit, was his son, the child he had abandoned. "Your father," Nathaniel began, his voice faltering. He was disoriented, grappling with the weight of the truth that loomed over them, threatening to crush him beneath its enormity. Lucas looked at him, confusion etched across his features. Yeah, he was never really a part of my life. Just some guy who made a lot of money and left. Nathaniel's heart sank. He wanted to reach out, to take Lucas's hands in his and tell him everything, the truth of who he was, the regret that had festered in the years since that fateful night. But the words caught in his throat, tangled in a web of shame and fear. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel managed to say, the sincerity of his words echoing in the space between them. "I can't imagine what that must have been like for you." Lucas's gaze softened, and Nathaniel could see the flicker of understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. "It was tough, but my mom did her best. She taught me to be strong, to not rely on anyone who didn't want to be there." A lump formed in Nathaniel's throat as he absorbed Lucas's words. The boy had grown into a man who understood the value of resilience, of pushing through adversity. Nathaniel felt small in comparison to the strength emanating from his son. "I wish I could have been there for you," Nathaniel said, his voice barely above a whisper, the weight of his regrets threatening to crush him. "I made a terrible mistake." Lucas regarded him thoughtfully, the tension hanging between them thick and palpable. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice steady yet probing. "Yes," Nathaniel admitted, the truth spilling from his lips like a confession. "Every day, I let my ego and ambition blind me to what truly mattered, and I lost everything in the process." Lucas studied him, searching for sincerity in Nathaniel's eyes. "You can't change the past, but you can change how you move forward." Nathaniel felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, but he was acutely aware that he had already squandered so much time. "I want to be better. I want to be a part of your life if you'll let me." "Why should I?" Lucas challenged, an edge to his voice. "You walked away. You had your chance." Nathaniel nodded, knowing he deserved the skepticism. "Because I've spent too long living in my mistakes. I want to make things right even if it's just for myself. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I want to try to earn your trust. I need to do this." Lucas looked away, contemplating Nathaniel's words. The noise of the airport faded into the background as they stood there, two strangers bound by blood, yet separated by years of silence. Would Lucas be willing to allow Nathaniel a chance at redemption? "I don't know if I can trust you," Lucas finally said, his voice softer now. "Yeah, you're a stranger to me." "I understand," Nathaniel replied, his heart heavy with the burden of his past. "But I hope you'll give me the opportunity to change that. I want to show you that I can be better." Lucas took a deep breath, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Let's just start with being honest. If you really want to be a part of my life, then you need to tell me everything." Nathaniel nodded, knowing that this was just the beginning of a long and uncertain road. But as he looked into Lucas's eyes, he felt a spark of hope, that perhaps, just perhaps, he could forge a new path, one that would lead them both toward healing and a future they could build together. The weight of the past still loomed large, but with it came the possibility of a second chance. The air was still thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the lingering sense of panic that had swept through the airport just moments ago. Nathaniel and Lucas found themselves seated at a small, round table in a bustling cafe, the chaotic energy of the airport now a distant hum. The two men, strangers bound by blood, stared at their steaming cups of coffee, each lost in thought, grappling with the weight of the day's events. Nathaniel took a deep breath, his heart still racing from the adrenaline-fueled chaos of the fire. The memory of pushing that employee to safety flooded his mind, and for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he had long suppressed, a sense of purpose, perhaps. As he glanced at Lucas, he couldn't help but notice the young man's demeanor. There was a confidence about him that Nathaniel had once possessed, now buried under layers of regret and loneliness. And that was quite an experience, huh? Nathaniel finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse but steady. He looked into Lucas's eyes, searching for a hint of understanding. "Then I didn't expect to be running into a fire today, let alone working alongside someone like you." Lucas raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile creeping onto his lips. I didn't think I'd be playing the hero either. It's not exactly how I planned my day." He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, the spoon clinking against the ceramic cup. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, studying Lucas's profile. There was something unmistakably familiar about him, the way he held himself, the intensity in his gaze. The resemblance was striking, yet Nathaniel couldn't quite place it. "What do you do?" he asked, hoping to divert the conversation to safer territory. "I'm in business," Lucas replied, his tone casual, but Nathaniel could sense the pride beneath it. Now, I just closed a deal for a startup I've been working on for years. It's taken a lot of hard work. Startup, huh? Nathaniel felt a pang of nostalgia. He remembered the early days of his own ventures, risky, exhilarating, and filled with promise. What kind of business? It's a tech company focused on sustainable energy solutions, Lucas explained, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. I really believe we can make a difference, you know? The world needs smarter, cleaner energy. Nathaniel nodded, a flicker of admiration crossing his features. That's ambitious. Most people don't think about the long-term effects of their choices. It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of profit. Exactly, Lucas said, leaning in slightly, his voice earnest. That's why I want to build something meaningful. I want to leave a legacy, not just a bank account. The words struck Nathaniel like a bolt of lightning. Legacy. It was a concept he had once cherished, but over the years, it had turned into nothing more than a series of accolades and wealth. He had lost sight of what truly mattered. I understand that, he admitted, his tone softer now. But it's a lot of pressure, isn't it? To carry that weight. Lucas seemed to ponder this for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. I guess it depends on how you look at it. I want to create something that lasts, something that can help people. But there's always that fear of failure. Nathaniel felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him as he recalled his own fears of inadequacy, of losing everything he had worked for. It was this fear that had driven him to the brink of arrogance, that had clouded his judgment and led to the mistakes he could no longer escape. Fear can be a powerful motivator, he said, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Lucas took a sip of his coffee, his gaze drifting to the window where the bustling airport lay beyond. Yeah, it can, but I've learned that you can't let it control you. You have to push through it, even when it feels impossible. Nathaniel felt a knot form in his throat. The young man across from him seemed so wise beyond his years, yet he was still just a kid, trying to navigate a world filled with uncertainty. You sound like you've been through a lot, he said, curious to learn more about Lucas's journey. Lucas chuckled softly, a hint of bitterness in his laugh. You could say that. I grew up without a father, you know? My mom raised me on her own. She always told me stories about him, how he was this big-shot businessman. But he was never there for me. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Nathaniel felt his heart drop, the weight of regret and guilt pressing down on him. I'm sorry to hear that, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. It must have been hard. It was, Lucas admitted, his expression shifting to one of vulnerability. But my mom made sure I never felt like I was missing out on anything. She taught me to be strong, to believe in myself. I owe her everything. Nathaniel nodded, his chest tightening. He thought of Celeste, the woman he had humiliated so many years ago. The woman who had undoubtedly poured her heart and soul into raising their son alone. She sounds like an incredible person. She is, Lucas said, a spark of pride evident in his voice. She sacrificed so much for me. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for her. I can only imagine, Nathaniel murmured, his mind racing through the memories of a life he had chosen to abandon. I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I didn't appreciate the people who mattered most. Lucas met Nathaniel's gaze, his expression shifting from curiosity to something more intense. Like who? Your family? Nathaniel hesitated, the truth clawing at him. My wife, he finally confessed, the weight of those words heavy on his heart. I hurt her in ways I can't even begin to explain. I took her for granted. What happened? Lucas pressed, his curiosity piqued. Nathaniel took a deep breath, the memories flooding back like a tidal wave. At a gala, I was supposed to honor her, to celebrate our family. But instead, I made a fool of myself. I belittled her in front of everyone, thinking it was funny. I didn't realize how much I was hurting her until it was too late. Lucas's expression changed. A mix of disbelief and empathy etched across his features. That's harsh. How could you do that? I was selfish, Nathaniel admitted, shame washing over him. I was so consumed by my own success that I forgot the most important thing, the people who stood by me. I lost her, and in the process, I lost my family. The silence that stretched between them was palpable, filled with unspoken understanding. Nathaniel could see the wheels turning in Lucas's mind, the questions forming but held back by uncertainty. Do you ever think about trying to make amends? Lucas asked quietly, his voice almost hesitant. Nathaniel felt a jolt of realization as he considered the question. It was a concept so foreign to him, yet so necessary. Every day, he confessed. But I don't know if it's even possible. I don't know if she could ever forgive me. Maybe she could, Lucas suggested, his tone optimistic. People can surprise you. It's never too late to try. Nathaniel looked at Lucas, a mixture of hope and despair swirling within him. You really think so? I do, Lucas replied firmly. If you're willing to change, to show her that you've learned from your mistakes, there's always a chance. As Nathaniel absorbed those words, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years of. Perhaps it wasn't too late for him after all. Perhaps there was still a chance to rebuild what he had lost, to reconcile with the family he had cast aside. Suddenly, Lucas leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. You know, it's funny. I've been thinking about trying to find my father one day, to understand who he is. Nathaniel's heart raced, a mix of dread and anticipation flooding through him. What if he's not who you expect? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lucas shrugged, a hint of vulnerability in his gaze. Maybe, but I think I need to know. To confront those feelings of abandonment. It's something I owe myself. Nathaniel swallowed hard, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. He was sitting across from his son, a son who had grown up without him, who was now carving his own path in a world full of challenges. As they sipped their coffee in that small cafe, Nathaniel knew deep down that this moment was just the beginning of a long, complicated journey. One that could lead to redemption and perhaps, just perhaps, a chance to be the father Lucas deserved. The airport cafe hummed with the low murmur of conversations and the clattering of cups, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Nathaniel and Lucas sat across from each other, both still processing the adrenaline of their recent ordeal. Nathaniel's brow furrowed as he stared into his steaming cup of coffee, the rich aroma doing little to ease the turmoil within him. Lucas, on the other hand, was visibly shaken, but determined to keep the conversation flowing. You know, Lucas began, his voice steady but soft, that was some crazy stuff back there. I've never been in a situation like that before. He looked directly at Nathaniel, gauging his reaction. Yeah, Nathaniel replied, his voice raspy. It made me realize a lot. You don't think about how quickly everything can change. He glanced up, catching Lucas's eye. I thought I had everything under control. Lucas nodded, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. I get that. My mom used to say life has a way of reminding you what really matters. He hesitated, the weight of his next words heavy on his tongue. She always talked about my dad, said he was a good man once, but he wasn't there when I needed him. The air between them thickened. Nathaniel felt a jolt of recognition at Lucas's words, an echo of his own regrets. Your father, what was he like? He asked, feigning casual interest while his heart raced. Lucas leaned back, folding his arms tightly across his chest as if to shield himself from the memories that threatened to surface. I don't know much about him, he admitted. Just what Mom told me. She said he was ambitious, driven, but that he'd lost his way. She always tried to protect me from the pain of his absence, but I could see it in her eyes. Nathaniel swallowed hard, feeling a lump forming in his throat. He wanted desperately to reach out and comfort this young man, but he was paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you. Lucas shrugged, attempting to dismiss the weight of his words. You learn to cope, you know? I've had to be strong for her. She always told me that I had it in me to succeed, that I could be better than the people who let me down. A flicker of admiration sparked within Nathaniel. Your mother sounds like an incredible woman. She raised you well. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his gaze intense. I wish I could have been a better man, a better father. Lucas studied him closely, his expression shifting from empathy to something more guarded. Did you ever try? Did you even want to be a father? Nathaniel flinched at the question, the truth clawing at his insides. I was so consumed by my ambitions. I thought I was doing it all for my family, but I lost sight of what really mattered. He took a deep breath, the weight of his past pressing down on him. I thought success would fill the gaps, but it only left me more isolated. Lucas's eyes narrowed and he leaned in, his voice low and steady. You talk about ambition and success like they're the same thing. But if you're alone at the top, what's the point? The question hung in the air, heavy and poignant. Nathaniel felt the truth of it resonate within him. He had spent years building his empire, but in the end, he had sacrificed everything of value. "You're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was building a legacy, but I was just building walls." Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his expression softening. "Do you ever think about reaching out to him to try and make amends?" Nathaniel felt his chest tighten at the thought. "Every day. But the fear of rejection, it holds me back." He paused, contemplating the weight of his next words. "I've hurt so many people, I don't know if I deserve forgiveness." Lucas's gaze hardened slightly, a mixture of frustration and empathy. "But you can't know unless you try. My mom always said that facing your past is the first step toward healing." The conversation took a somber turn as Nathaniel felt the weight of Lucas's words settle into his heart. "Healing, it's a foreign concept to me," he admitted. "I've always run from my mistakes, hoping they'd just disappear." Lucas leaned back, his demeanor shifting to one of understanding. "I get it. I used to run from my problems too. But then I realized that running only made things worse. I had to confront my demons if I wanted to grow." Nathaniel felt a stirring within him, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness that had surrounded him for so long. "You're wise beyond your years, Lucas. I wish I had someone like you in my life back then. Maybe things would have turned out differently." Lucas offered a small smile, his eyes brightening. "Maybe they still can. I mean, it's never too late, right? You can still make changes. Be the man you want to be." A heavy silence fell between them as Nathaniel contemplated the possibility of redemption. Just as he was about to speak, Lucas suddenly turned serious, the weight of his next words palpable. "You know, my mom always said my dad was a businessman, but she never really went into detail. I never understood why she kept it vague." Nathaniel's heart raced, the tension thickening as he sensed the conversation taking a pivotal turn. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lucas's brow furrowed, confusion clouding his features. "She never wanted to talk about him, but she'd drop hints here and there. I remember one time she mentioned a name, Wexler. I didn't think much of it then, but it stuck with me." The name hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Nathaniel felt the ground shift beneath him. "Wexler," he echoed, his heart pounding in his chest. Lucas's eyes widened as realization dawned upon him. "Yo, wait, you're Nathaniel Wexler, right? The businessman?" Nathaniel's throat went dry as he nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." Lucas's expression shifted from shock to a mix of disbelief and recognition. My mother, Celeste, she always spoke about you. I never put the pieces together until now." The revelation hit Nathaniel like a freight train, the memories of Celeste flooding back with a rush of guilt and regret. "Celeste? She was your mother?" he whispered, the weight of the truth crashing down on him. Lucas leaned in closer, his eyes searching Nathaniel's face for answers. You didn't know? She always said you were someone who lost his way. But I thought there was a chance you'd changed." Nathaniel's mind raced, the implications of Lucas's words crashing over him like a tidal wave. "I never intended to hurt her or you," he said, his voice trembling. "I was foolish and selfish." Lucas shook his head. "You can't change the past, but you can change your future. You're not just a businessman to me. You're my father. And that means something." Nathaniel stared at Lucas, his heart racing as the gravity of the situation settled in. "Your father," he repeated, the words feeling foreign yet familiar on his tongue. Lucas swallowed hard, the emotion evident in his eyes. "And I always wanted to know who you were. I wanted to understand why you left, but now I just don't know what to think." Nathaniel's heart sank as he watched the conflict play out across Lucas's face. "I wish I could explain. I wish I could go back and change everything," he said, his voice cracking. "But you can't," Lucas replied, his tone steady yet tinged with sadness. "You can't change what happened. All you can do is make a choice now. What do you want to do?" The question hung in the air, heavy and profound. Nathaniel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, a fork in the road that could lead to redemption or further regret. "I want to try," he said finally, his voice firm with conviction. "I want to make amends, not just for myself, but for you and your mother." Lucas's expression softened, a glimmer of hope shining through the haze of uncertainty. "Then let's figure this out together, one step at a time." As they sat across from each other, two strangers bound by blood and circumstance, Nathaniel felt the stirrings of a long-buried connection. For the first time in years, he dared to hope for a future that could be different, a chance to rewrite his story. The cafe in the airport buzzed with the frantic energy of travelers. But for Nathaniel and Lucas, time seemed to slow as they faced each other across a small table. The chaos of the earlier fire still echoed in their minds, but now they were enveloped in a different kind of tension, one that was laden with unspoken truths and the weight of years lost. Nathaniel looked at Lucas, his heart pounding in his chest. This young man, with his sharp features and determined gaze, was the embodiment of everything he had missed, everything he had sacrificed on the altar of ambition and pride. His mind raced with questions, but he found himself at a loss for words. A loss. Lucas began, breaking the silence with a steady voice. After everything that happened back there, I feel like I should say something. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped tightly on the table. You were brave. I saw you push that guy out of the way of the flames. That was heroic. Nathaniel blinked, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected compliment. I didn't think of it like that, he replied, his voice low. I just reacted. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. He paused, searching Lucas's face for a hint of what was to come. But maybe I should have been braver in other ways, too. Lucas studied him, his expression shifting from admiration to a more somber concern. You don't have to pretend with me. I can see that you're wrestling with something. And I've been wrestling with a lot, too. He hesitated, as if weighing the gravity of his next words. My mom always told me that you were a great man, a successful businessman, but she never talked about you much beyond that. The mention of Celeste sent a jolt through Nathaniel. He had spent years trying to bury the guilt of his past, but hearing her name brought it all rushing back. The pain he had caused her, the humiliation he had inflicted in front of everyone that fateful night. She deserved better, he admitted, his voice cracking as the memories flooded in. I treated her poorly. I was arrogant, and I thought success would fill the void. It didn't. Lucas's brow furrowed as he absorbed Nathaniel's words. I always wondered why you weren't around. My mom spoke about you in a way that made me think you were this larger-than-life figure. But when I grew up, it was hard. I wanted to know you, to understand why you left. Nathaniel felt his heart constrict. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like a heavy shroud. I left because I was consumed by my own ambition. I thought I could build something great, something that would last. But I didn't realize that what I was losing in the process was far more valuable than any business deal or trophy. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of regret. I lost my family. Lucas's expression softened, but there was still a hint of anger simmering beneath the surface. You think you can just say that and it's all okay? That you can come back now and act like everything's fine? It's not that simple. His voice cracked with emotion. You don't even know me. You don't know what I went through. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Nathaniel replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't expect you to understand how much I regret my actions. I've been living alone in this mansion, surrounded by my achievements, and yet I feel empty every day. I let my pride blind me. I let my family slip away. Lucas leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. I'm not asking for your remorse or your pity. I just want to know, what do you want from me right now? His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, a challenge. Nathaniel's heart raced as he considered the question. I want a chance, he said finally, his eyes locking onto Lucas's. A chance to make things right. I want to understand you, to be part of your life if you'll let me. I want to get to know the son I never knew. For a moment, the air between them crackled with intensity, a collision of hope and skepticism. Lucas searched Nathaniel's face, looking for sincerity, for a sign that this wasn't just another hollow apology. You realize that you've missed so much, right? I've built my life without you. I'm not the same person I would have been if you'd been there. I know, Nathaniel admitted, his voice thick with emotion. And I can't change the past, but I can try to be better. I can try to be the father you deserve, even if it's late. He paused, swallowing hard. I want to learn about you, Lucas. I want to know your dreams, your fears, everything I missed. I want to be part of your future. Lucas closed his eyes briefly, as if weighing the gravity of Nathaniel's words. It's not going to be easy, he said at last, opening his eyes again to meet Nathaniel's gaze. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect everything to be perfect. Trust takes time. It's not something you can just ask for. I understand, Nathaniel replied, his heart heavy with the weight of his mistakes. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I know I've lost that trust, and I have to earn it back. But I can't just stand by and do nothing, not anymore. As Lucas listened, Nathaniel saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Perhaps hope, perhaps skepticism. But it was something. "What do you plan to do?" Lucas asked, a hint of a challenge in his voice. "Just show up at my company and start giving orders? You realize that I'm the one who makes the decisions now?" "No," Nathaniel said firmly, shaking his head. "I wouldn't dream of undermining your hard work. I respect what you've built. I'd rather support you than take over. If you'll have me, I want to be your ally, not your boss. I want to help you find success on your own terms." Lucas studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're saying all the right things, but how do I know you mean it?" His voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. "So how do I know you won't just revert back to your old ways?" Nathaniel felt a pang of shame at the accusation, but he also understood the validity of the question. "No, you don't," he replied honestly. "All I can offer you is my commitment to change. I have to prove it to you. I can't expect you to trust me right away. That's something that has to be earned." Lucas looked down at the table, his fingers tapping nervously against the surface. "You know, I had this grand idea in my head of what it would be like to finally meet you. I thought there would be fireworks, some grand reconciliation. But sitting here, I just feel confused." Nathaniel nodded, the weight of their conversation pressing down on him. "Confusion is natural. I've been living in a fog of regret for years. I can't expect clarity to come easily for either of us." He leaned in, his voice earnest. "But if you're willing, I want to try. I want to see if we can rebuild something. I want to be there for you if you'll let me." Lucas looked up, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "It's not going to happen overnight," he warned. "This is going to take time. You'll have to show me that you're serious, that you're not just saying what I want to hear." Nathaniel felt a surge of relief mixed with determination. "I will, I promise you." His voice was steady, filled with conviction. "I'm ready to put in the work. I've spent too long running away from my mistakes. I need to face them and you head on." In that moment, a fragile thread began to weave between them. A connection formed not just from blood, but from a shared desire for authenticity and healing. It was a small step, but one that Nathaniel knew held the potential to change everything. As the smoke cleared and the chaos of the airport fire settled, Nathaniel and Lucas found themselves seated at a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixing with the lingering scent of burnt debris. Nathaniel's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline of the rescue, but from the overwhelming realization of how close he had come to losing a connection he never knew existed. Lucas was sitting across from him, his youthful face a mixture of determination and vulnerability. They had just shared a harrowing experience, and the weight of their conversation hung in the air. Nathaniel took a moment to gather his thoughts, his gaze drifting to the window, where the busy airport life continued around them. He could see families reuniting, travelers rushing to their gates, and a little girl laughing as she clung to her father's leg. It stirred something deep within him, a longing he had suppressed for far too long. "Your mother must be proud of you," Nathaniel said, finally breaking the silence. "She raised you well." Lucas looked down at his coffee, swirling it absent-mindedly. "Yeah, she always believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She told me stories about you, but they were mostly, well, not good." Nathaniel winced at the honesty in Lucas's tone. The memories of his past mistakes flooded back. The harsh words he had spoken, the distance he had maintained. "I was a fool, Lucas. I was too wrapped up in my own success to see what was right in front of me." Lucas lifted his gaze, his eyes piercing through Nathaniel's defenses. "No, you don't need to tell me that. I've heard it from her my whole life. But it was all just words. What I need to know now is, are you truly sorry for what you did?" The question hung in the air like a heavy fog. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I am. I've lived with that guilt every day since that night." "Then why didn't you ever reach out?" Lucas pressed, his voice a mix of frustration and hurt. "You had every opportunity. You were just too busy building your empire, weren't you?" Nathaniel felt the sting of truth in Lucas's words. He had built a legacy, but at what cost? "I thought I was doing what was best for you and your mother. I thought success would make everything okay." Lucas shook his head, a bitter smile forming on his lips. "Success doesn't replace a father. It doesn't fill the void of your absence. I learned to navigate life without you, but it doesn't mean I didn't want you there." The revelation hit Nathaniel like a punch to the gut. He had never considered the emotional toll his choices had exacted from his family. "I can't change the past, but I want to change the future. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me." Lucas raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his features. And why should I trust you? You missed 25 years of my life. You don't even know me. I want to know you, Nathaniel insisted, leaning forward. I want to understand who you are, what you care about. I want to make amends. Talk is cheap, Nathaniel, Lucas said, his voice steady. You want to be part of my life? Then prove it. Show me you can be a different man. A flicker of hope ignited in Nathaniel's chest. Perhaps this was his chance to redeem himself. What do you want from me? I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Lucas took a deep breath, his expression softening slightly. First, I want to know what you've been doing all these years. What kind of man are you now? Nathaniel hesitated, the weight of his past pressing down on him. I've spent my life chasing success, but it hasn't brought me happiness. I've been alone in my mansion, surrounded by accolades that mean nothing without family. Lucas nodded slowly, absorbing Nathaniel's words. And the businesses? You've built an empire, but at what cost? I've sacrificed relationships for the sake of profits, Nathaniel admitted, shame coating his voice. I've neglected what really matters. Then what's stopping you now? You're still the CEO, right? Lucas asked, his tone sharp but curious. Yes, but I'm ready to step down, Nathaniel said. I want to pass the torch to you. You've shown me today that you have what it takes to lead. I want to support you, not as a boss, but as a father. Lucas's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and uncertainty flashing across his face. You want to give me your companies just like that? It's not just about the companies, Nathaniel clarified. It's about rebuilding our relationship. I want to be there for you, to help you grow, and to learn from you as well. A long silence settled between them as Lucas considered Nathaniel's offer. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You have a lot of work to do, Nathaniel. It's not just about business. You need to earn my trust, and that won't happen overnight. I understand, Nathaniel replied earnestly. I'm willing to put in the effort. I want to start by being honest with you, sharing my failures, my regrets, and I want to hear about your life, your dreams. You're the future, Lucas. I want to support you in whatever way I can. Lucas studied him intently, searching for sincerity in Nathaniel's eyes. You're saying the right things, but I need to see actions. It's easy to talk, but where were you when I needed you? I know I can't change the past, but I can change how I act moving forward. I want to be a father to you, one who is present and supportive, Nathaniel said, his voice firm. I promise to be there for you, to help you navigate the complexities of running the business. You don't have to do it alone. Lucas looked away, a conflict raging within him. You have no idea how hard it is to build something from the ground up, especially without a father figure. I want to learn, Nathaniel urged. I want to understand your journey. If you let me in, I promise not to interfere, but to guide you when needed. Silence enveloped them again as Lucas weighed Nathaniel's words. Finally, he spoke, his tone cautious but hopeful. Okay, I'll give you a chance. But know this, I won't tolerate any more disappointments. Thank you, Nathaniel replied, relief washing over him. I won't let you down again. This is just the beginning for us. As they continued to converse, a sense of connection blossomed between them. They talked about Lucas's ambitions, his vision for the future, and the ways he planned to innovate the family business. Nathaniel listened intently, genuinely fascinated by the passion and drive of the young man sitting across from him. The conversation shifted seamlessly from personal to professional, and Nathaniel felt a sense of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, he envisioned a future that included not just success, but a relationship with his son, one that could potentially heal the wounds of the past. As they shared laughter and ideas, Nathaniel realized that the true wealth he had long sought was not in accolades or riches, but in the bond he was beginning to forge with Lucas. It was an opportunity for redemption, a chance to rewrite their story, and perhaps, just perhaps, to become the father Lucas had always deserved. The sun began to set outside the cafe, casting a warm glow that illuminated their faces. Nathaniel felt a sense of peace settle over him, knowing that he had taken the first step towards reconciliation. He would have to work hard to earn Lucas's trust, but for the first time, he believed it was possible. And as they finished their coffee, both men felt a renewed sense of purpose, a father and son united by the desire to build a future together, one that would honor the past while embracing the promise of new beginnings.